morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Wright. I'm Chief Policy and Communications Officer here at ICAW, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this great building, Chartered Accountants Hall, for the Conservative Party Business Engagement event with the Leader of the Opposition, Shadow Chancellor, and the Shadow Business and Trade Secretary, as well as you, leaders of Britain's businesses. Helping to convene political and business leaders is a priority for us at ICAW. We were pleased to welcome all parties for a business hustings for last year's general election. And indeed, on the 9th of September, we welcomed Kemi for a great speech on business and the economy here at Chartered Accountants Hall. Successful business policy should be based on insight and evidence should be sought from business. Our 200,000 members are a great source for that insight and evidence. They don't just understand the economy, they shape it. 84% of FTSE 100 companies has an ICAW member in the boardroom. 3 million businesses across the UK are advised by an ICAW chartered accountant to help them grow and thrive. And on that vital issue of growth, our members at the heart of the real economy, making day-to-day, long-term decisions, are telling us that their pursuit of growth is being hindered because doing business is too expensive, with rising costs and a historically high tax burden. Too complicated, with a bewildering set of regulatory demands, and too uncertain, with short-term changes and speculation, freezing confidence and investment. Last week's budget provided a real opportunity to provide stability, simplicity and long-term thinking to create the conditions for growth. However, when we polled over 1,000 ICAW chartered accountants in the 24 hours after the budget, 4/5 said that it had been too complex, it lacked a coherent strategy and was ultimately not focused on growth, with particular concern raised about the impact on SMEs, investment, the cost of hiring people and the high street. We will continue at ICAW to provide this insight to government and other political leaders, which is why this morning's event is so important. No doubt some of the points I've raised about business being too complicated, too expensive, too uncertain will come up in conversation and questioning between you and the Shadow Cabinet. So welcome again. And to guide this discussion, I'm delighted to introduce our chair for this morning, Liam Halligan.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's very nice to be here. I'm an economist. That means I was pretty good at maths at school, but I didn't quite have enough personality to become an accountant. I'm, of course, a columnist at the Telegraph. I've been writing my economics agenda column in the Sunday Telegraph now for 26 years. I started as a child. And seriously, over many years of journalism, both print and broadcast, I've often consulted this organisation. I've often interviewed people from this organisation. I think you guys do a fantastic job. And it's the accountants and the lawyers and the really knowledgeable people like you in this room who really are the spine of the City of London and everything that does for our country. So long may that continue. So I'm here as a journalist. I'm happy to compare this event. It's the kind of thing I do for political parties. If they ask me, I think if you're a columnist, if you're in public life, it's the sort of thing you should do. We've had just now, of course, a budget. The government says it's fixing the foundations of the economy. The Conservatives say it's a budget for Benefit Street. Rachel Reeves' long-awaited budget, of course, just pushed the tax burden up by £30 billion a year on top of last year's £40 billion tax increase. Last year's budget was itself the most punitive, in the sense the most tax-raising budget in real terms for over 30 years. So we are in a historic situation, as all of you all know. Labour are in office with a 1997-style majority, up in the 150s, 60s and 70s, like Tony Blair. But rather than the national debt being 35% of GDP, which it was in 1997, it is, of course, now well north of 90% of GDP. I think it's fair to say, objectively, the government having pushed that figure up. In that context, on the right of politics, the marketplace for ideas is working, despite all the noise. The Conservatives are now pledging detailed cost savings of £47 billion a year, and they say that 23 billion of those annual savings will be on welfare. The party, as you will hear, is trying to champion fiscal responsibility, which isn't always a popular political sell. Well, you'd think that if you followed the broadcast media, but I think some of us know that out there among the so-called silent majority, particularly in times of financial and fiscal stress, there actually is a marketplace for fiscal responsibility. So allow me to introduce first onto stage the Leader of the Opposition, of course, Kemi Badenoch. She's the... And we have Mel Stride, of course, Shadow Chancellor, and Andrew Griffith, Shadow Business Secretary. So Kemi is, of course, the MP for North Essex, formerly Saffron Walden. She's been an MP since 2017. Before politics, she took degrees in engineering and law, worked as a software engineer, worked in a bank, worked famously in the media. So, Kemi, let's start with you. Some people have said you've had quite a combative response to this budget. How do you justify that, and why would your party do better?
It's very easy to justify, because I was speaking for all of the people out there who were horrified by the last budget and terrified at what was going to be coming in the one we saw on Wednesday. And I also needed to present a contrast between my team and the Labour Party. Sitting on this table is a strong, united team of people who've worked in the private sector, started our own businesses, have experience in creating growth. We know where money comes from. The party that's running the country right now thinks money grows on trees. What we saw was a budget for benefits, not a budget for growth. And I think, given the state of the economy, it was disgraceful that we ended up with the OBR and the IFS saying that household incomes were going down, and it was absolutely dismal for growth. But what has been most extraordinary has been what we've seen in the last few days, which is that the Chancellor appears to have given wrong or false information deliberately to try and get her budget a soft landing. We are at the Institute for Accounting. You all know that if a CEO had done this before their annual meeting, they would be sacked. And that is why Mel has written to the Financial Conduct Authority, the right place, to make sure that this is properly investigated. What we see is issues around financial probity and market abuse. And I do believe that she should resign because of that, because she has given false information, broken promise after promise, given people false hope and false reasons to vote Labour, not been able to stick to them. What she's shown is that she cannot manage the economy. So I'm very happy to be combative in that circumstance. I think the circumstances actually demand combativeness.
Mel Stride, you've been an MP since 2010. You are the MP for Central Devon, the Shadow Chancellor. You also have a business background. You've built and sold businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. Tell us about the big macro picture here. Tell us how and why the Tories have come to the point where you are now promising, pledging £47 billion of welfare savings. And I suggest after the last budget, that figure may actually go up.
Well, good morning, everybody. Look, I think the answer to the challenges that we face as a country, not just economic challenges, but other challenges around defence and so on, is growth and productivity growth. And that's what we've got to get the solution for. What you've seen in this budget is no growth at all, really. I mean, after this first year, which is actually a downgrade on the growth number from the budget last year, growth in every year of this forecast is down on the spring. And that's not by accident. That's because of the wrong economic choices. So what the Chancellor has done is to load up taxes in breach of her manifesto and the promises that she's made on hard-working people. So we've seen that with the income tax threshold freezes, and instead spend money raised through that taxes on more welfare. And that is at the heart of the socialist way, because that is about redistribution and resources, which is important in economics, but also important in economics is incentives. And what you shouldn't be doing is loading up taxes on the productive part of the economy whilst redistributing to the unproductive part of the economy. And this is a long-standing picture that we've seen with this government. When they came into office, the first thing they did, despite the fact they said they wouldn't do it, was heap £40 billion worth of extra taxes on the economy, 25 billion of it through NICs increases on businesses. That killed growth. That's part of that story of diminished growth. They talked down the economy with a fictitious £22 billion black hole, which extinguished the animal spirits in the economy. But they did what socialists also do, which they went out and borrowed vast amounts of money, spent vast amounts of money, which fed into higher inflation. So the IMF says we will have the highest inflation this year in the G7 and the same next year. And that's why interest rates are higher for longer than they would otherwise be. And on this massive mound of debt that they're creating, the servicing costs are now £100 billion a year, or twice what we spend on defence. So we've got into this doom loop of the wrong decisions, particularly around spending, tax and inflation, that has driven the destruction of her fiscal headroom, which is a recurrent theme now, leading her to take yet more wrong choices around tax. The answer, Liam, is to go on top and control public spending, particularly in the welfare budget. So Kemi and I announced at our conference £47 billion of savings, 23 billion of those in the welfare area, and at least half of that going to bear down on the deficit and the debt, because we are the party of fiscal responsibility. We recognise we have to live within our means, and also getting taxes down, particularly taxes that drive economic growth. And that is our alternative.
And just to be precise, because we are in possibly the most financially numerate room in London at the moment.
Hope so, yes.
That 47, these things really, really matter. The public's watching, the markets are watching. That 47 billion that you're pledging, it's a serious number. That is the annual saving you will get to over the forecast period in terms of how you're looking at the economy.
Yes, so that is, just to get slightly technical, that is the 47 billion is the saving in 29-30. That's the key year for the fiscal targets. And I'll just add one thing to this, Liam, is that people criticised us as a party early on for not coming out with 5-minute quick fixes, right? Where are your policies and so on? The only way you get these numbers to stick is to do the hard yards and the deep thinking. And that's exactly what Kemi has led. And that is why that number that we're now discussing has not been taken down, has not been called out. It has stood the test of time since our conference because it's based on real deep analysis.
That's a long time since your conference, huh?
It seems like years.
In politics.
It does feel like a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I think the bottom line is that there was an alternative to last week's budget. Labour will pretend that this is the only thing that could possibly have done, that could possibly have been done. They have given up even trying to find growth. They're not looking for it. All they're doing now is dividing whatever money is there rather than trying to create it. The Prime Minister is going to give a speech at 10:30, which he will say is all about growth and how they're going to deliver it. No, it won't be. This is a man who, when we said, let's help you get this welfare bill over the line, you need to cut spending, he wasn't interested. He preferred to defer to the backbenchers. The hard left right now have said, we've won. That's what the hard left in his party has said. He says he wants to deregulate. You know, Andrew will talk about the employment rights bill. He doesn't really have an agenda. That is the thing that's worrying me. And what I saw last week was a whole bunch of people who've presided over rising unemployment. They're very happy for all of you to lose your jobs so that they can save their jobs. And I think that is a serious problem.
Yeah. We are going to come to... We are going to come to some media questions, then we're going to have questions from business. Before that, let's hear from Andrew Griffith. Now, Andrew is, of course, the MP for Arundel and South Downs. He's been an MP since 2019 after a sustained career in business. This is a homecoming for Andrew because he is indeed a chartered accountant. He was also at one stage, lots of personality, he is also also at one stage, I think, Andrew, you were the youngest CFO of any FTSE 100 company. So, Andrew, let's talk about we've heard from Kemi on the high politics. We've heard from Mel on the big macro picture. You've been really focused as business secretary on the Employment Rights Bill. You've been focused on the detail of taxation, business property relief, and so on. When you look at this budget and you're told it is a budget for growth, how do you respond to that?
Well, look, that idea, Liam, is clearly nonsensical. I mean, the big thing for business last week, and I've been speaking to businesses ever since the budget, the first thing is you want a budget that's going to inspire confidence. Confidence is the animal spirits. It's what gets people hiring, investing. We had the world's longest run-up to a budget, and that 3-month period not just coincided, it was causal, put business confidence absolutely on the floor. You might have expected some sort of relief rally, and we've not even seen that. So the Institute of Directors has a survey out this morning showing that business confidence is losing to a global pandemic virus as a result of what this government is doing. And that means people won't hire, they won't invest, they won't grow. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's right-hand man, said, look, show me the incentives and I'll tell you the outcome. And the key thing, I think the key thing this government don't understand because of their abject failure to understand business is the incentives. The things that make people get up in the morning and want to found a business, start a business, stick with a business. Whether it's business property relief, the family business death tax last week could have seen some repeal, some reversal, some mitigant. We got nothing on either the family business or the family farm death tax. Look at what they're doing on business rates. Publicans have been ringing my phone, and Kate Nichols from Hospitality UK and the British Pub Association all over the weekend, desperate to understand another misleading lie told by the Chancellor that she was going to bear down on business rates. That is not true. They are going up, taking in the combination the upwards revaluation and the removal of reliefs that we Conservatives put in place when we were in government. She did not last week emulate our plan to take 250,000 high street businesses out of business rates entirely. She went in the other direction. And yes, there's some transitional relief, but if the destination is wrong, it doesn't matter how quickly or not you get there, it's the wrong destination, and businesses will be sitting down this morning looking at their prospects and their future. And then finally, you mentioned it, Kemi mentioned it, the Employment Rights Bill, or the Bill for Unemployment. That is a 330-page bill. It is laughable when this government talks about bearing down on red tape. They are spinning up an entire new regulator consisting of former union officials and employment lawyers, their Fair Work agency, that is going to seek to bring cases against employers even when not a single employee complains. So yes, we welcome, as business will, their reversal of their day one rights, the period to 6 months, helped by a very strong Conservative team who's fought that bill every single inch of the way, working as a team. But you don't make a 330-page red tape bill any better by making it a 329-page red tape bill.
Yeah. Andrew Griffith, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we are going to come to questions from the business audience, but before we do that, we're going to have questions from the print and broadcast media, and I think Kemi is going to call those.
Thank you. First question from Harry Horton, ITV.
Thank you very much. Harry Horton, ITV News. My question is about the OBR. Do you think the OBR is still fit for purpose? Do you think it should be abolished? And should the chair, Richard Hughes, have to resign?
It's not the OBR that gave misleading information to the public. That was the Chancellor. So asking the OBR to take the punishment, in my view, is deflecting. A lot of people made decisions based on the information that the Chancellor briefed on the 4th of November when she did that weird breakfast press conference, and on the 10th of November as well. Some people left the country because they were worried about an exit tax. Some people drew down their pensions, an irreversible decision. Others were fixing their mortgage rates. Real decisions were made while she was trying to give her budget good PR. So I don't think that talking about the OBR is where we should be. That is a distraction. There is only one person in the dock right now, and that is Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. Next question from Amanda Akas, I hope I've said that right, from Sky News.
Two of your former MPs have just defected to Reform UK, saying they're the only party that has the vision to restore pride in Britain. That's a bit of an indictment of your leadership, isn't it?
Not really. The fact is, those are MPs who want more welfare. I'm being very clear. We are not the welfare party. All the other parties have campaigned to lift the two-child benefit cap, including Reform. And I remember those two MPs, they wanted more and more public spending. They've gone to a party that they think is going to do that. And I think it's very interesting that at a time when Labour is on the ropes, the Chancellor is in the dock, Reform thinks the most important thing is to attack us. That just shows that they're not interested in getting the very best for this country. All they're interested in is low politics and trying to destroy the Conservative Party. We are interested in doing what is right for all those people out there who are struggling, and we're going to stay focused on doing our jobs. Jack Waters, GB News.
Thank you. It was a quick question about whether, you spoke about the £23 billion that you're going to save from welfare. I wondered, with half of the £47 billion going on paying off the debt and deficit, which ones you really want to cut on tax to drive growth, particularly for hard-working Britons?
Thank you. So our golden economic rule is how we frame the way that we're going to run the economy. We have got to bring down public spending. We absolutely have to. We're spending way too much. And we need to stop spending so much on debt interest. Quite a lot of our money is just basically going on the interest on that. So savings to go on the deficit and the rest on growth measures, investments, tax cuts. Stamp duty was the big one, which we talked about. The housing market has completely gummed up. The run-up to the budget did not help. But we want to see business create growth. The bottom line is that we understand that it is not government that creates growth. It is actually business that creates growth. What government needs to do is create the right conditions. We have people running the country who think that they're the ones who are going to fix it all as long as they tinker here and tinker there, give benefits to a certain group. That is completely wrong. So we have laid out some of the things that we will reverse. Andrew and Mel talked about the family farms tax, APR, BPR, all of those things, which we think are not actually going to raise any money. I'm sure Mel can come in with on a little bit more detail, but we want to make sure that we have a plan that's going to work, given that Labour is going to be leaving a huge, huge mess behind. There's only one party that's got a team of people who can fix it.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. So, as I said earlier, £47 billion worth of well-thought-through savings, at least half of that going to paying down the deficit for the reasons that Kemi has just given. We've got to get that deficit down. It's not fair to pass on debt to future generations in that way. It's ruinously expensive. In fact, debt servicing costs, if it was a Whitehall department, would be the third largest department in government. Not spending money on improving public services, but paying off our creditors because of the profligacy of this Chancellor. And putting also money into getting taxes down. So primary residences, getting the property market moving, that has important economic positives. People being able to move to where work is more readily, downsizing, freeing up space in the housing market, and so on. Getting small businesses in high streets out of business rates altogether, 250,000 of them, many of whom, as Andrew has just said, are struggling. And then finally, a big, bold offer to young people taking their first job, whereby instead of paying national insurance, they're actually receiving that money themselves as a down payment on a future property purchase. Those are the right kind of priorities we should have as an economy, not spending more on welfare payments.
Thank you. Harry Farley, BBC.
Thank you, Kemi Badenoch. Harry Farley from BBC. There was a productivity downgrade in the OBR's forecasts, and at least part of that was down to your party's time in office. The OBR talks about the Brexit deal, lack of investment. Do you want to just be honest and take responsibility for your party's part in that downgrade?
So first of all, I'll start by saying that we recognise there was a productivity problem. The private sector did not have the productivity problem that the public sector did. Quite a lot of our time was spent dealing with issues like we ended up paying people to stay at home. So we recognize that there were significant issues. But there's nothing in this budget that does anything about productivity. The only time the Chancellor mentioned it was to use it as a stick to beat the last government. It's everybody else's fault except her own. So yes, let's talk about how we can improve productivity. There will be many difficult decisions that would need to be made. And Mel can talk a little bit more about that. So I'm not here to say that everything that happened when we were in government was perfect. It obviously wasn't. But the difference between us and Labour is that we accept that mistakes were made, we show some humility, and we start talking about how we're going to fix it, rather than we're perfect, we've done nothing wrong, look over there. That's the difference between us and Labour.
Yeah.
Mel?
So in the OBR's report this time around, a startling fact is that they stated effectively there was not one single measure in that budget that increased growth. That's why we've got all these growth downgrades. Not one single measure. When it comes to productivity in the past, productivity is in the hands of this government. One of the first things they did when they came into office was to make big inflationary pay awards to those in the public sector. The train drivers got 14%, junior doctors got 22%. Not a single string attached to those payments. What they should be doing is demanding productivity and efficiency gains as a consequence. And the final thing I'll say on productivity, the downgrade was an average across the scorecard of going down from 1.3 to 1%. That cost about 16 billion to set against that headroom as an offset. It is quite possible, because the trend productivity rate since 2008, the global financial crisis, has been 0.5%, that there could be a downgrade at some further point down the line, unless this government really grips this. And if that happens, that headroom, even though it's been rebuilt and more, could be at risk. So this government is creating risk within the way in which it's managing the economy, even though they're saying we're expanding the headroom. They're not dealing with the underlying structural issues that will get us out of that predicament.
David Shepherd, FT.
Good morning, sorry. Yesterday you suggested Rachel Reeves was lying. Today you said she may have given wrong or false information. A subtle difference there in the language. Are you still accusing Rachel Reeves of being a liar today?
Yes. Noah Hoffman from The Sun.
Thank you. Noah Hoffman from The Sun. You've spoken a lot about the need to tackle a very large welfare bill, but missing from that conversation is how much of a big chunk that is taken up by the pension triple lock. That's policy you say you're not going to touch, and yet we see loads of young people leaving the United Kingdom because they feel like economic policies are not built around them and their ambitions. Do you have any more to say on the triple lock? Are you ever going to look at it? That's something Nigel Farage has pledged to do, or is this a given for eternity for the Conservative Party?
So young people are leaving because opportunity is disappearing. I don't think that many of them are going through fiscal policy in detail. They want to get jobs, they can't get jobs. Unemployment has risen every single month since Labour came into office. Graduate recruitment is at record lows since Labour came into office. So our priority right now is jobs and growth. The triple lock is Conservative policy. And yes, it is a huge cost, but right now, making changes to the triple lock does not do anything for growth. What we can do for growth is find people jobs, get them off welfare and into work. That is a huge priority that's going to take a lot of effort. That is where we're putting our focus. You can make changes to the triple lock, we can all get poorer together. You can get people into work, get the economy growing, we all get richer. If the economy was growing at 2-3%, we wouldn't even be having this conversation about the triple lock. So the priority is the wrong place. And good luck to all those people who think that it's reform that's going to sort it out. Every time you ask them a question, they give a different answer about their policies. We are serious people. We are a strong team. We work together, and we're going to find a way to sort this out. Conservative Party policy is that, was or has always been the triple lock. We brought it in. But right now, the real problem is that we have an economy where people are going on welfare to an extent that the rider is getting heavier than the horse. We need to deal with the fact that not enough people are working first, and that is our priority. And the final question from the media is Martin Beckford from the Mail.
Thank you, Martin Beckford from the Daily Mail. You said you want Rachel Reeves to go, but do you not worry that a different Chancellor would be more left-wing than her? And also, everyone will have seen she was trying to avoid your gaze in the start of the BBC programme yesterday. Did you speak to her at all off camera? Thank you.
I did speak to her, I think, even on camera. I mean, Rachel Reeves and I probably don't agree on very much, but quite a lot of what you see in Parliament is more theatre than anything else. We're all still people who can have a conversation. But to your first question, sorry, I've actually forgotten what the first question was now.
About her going and somebody worse.
Yes, yes, that's true. Things could always get worse. That is what happens with Labour.
It reminds me of something. Things can happen. You get worse. Sorry.
But what we need them to do is actually open their eyes and listen to business. If I were Keir Starmer, I don't know why I'm giving him this advice. If I were Keir Starmer, I would be asking someone to stand down from their seat and they get a sensible person who everybody in the country can have some faith in and put them in there and make them Chancellor. But they're not going to do that. Instead, they're going to go through lots of different cycles of Labour MPs, some of whom are very similar to the ones that have gone to the Jeremy Corbyn party. We've seen what a rabble they are. Labour are actually not that much different. The hard left on their backbenches is driving the car seat. So it doesn't matter whether it's Rachel Reeves or not. She is clearly not the one in control. A few months ago, she said that two-child benefit cap was not affordable. Suddenly it was. At the same time, she was saying that she had a huge fiscal hole, which the OBR says that was not the case. They are all over the place. And what we really need is a Conservative government with the three of us making sure that we can run the economy in a way that business understands and where we create growth. Not a Labour Party that is just focused on creating welfare. They're no longer the Labour Party. They are the welfare party.
Can I make one? Sorry. One very quick observation, which it really has come to something, ladies and gentlemen. If the justification for keeping somebody is there could actually be somebody who's even worse to take over. I mean, that is now the argument. Right? I say no more.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've now got just under half an hour for some questions from all of you. We're going to start with a question from Jonathan Brenton. Jonathan, could you stand up and you'll be given a mic. Please keep your questions brief and brisk. We want to get as much feedback from the panel as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm from Pernod Ricard. We are French investors in the Scotch whisky industry. So I should say, Kemi, thank you for what you did while in government to get the India deal as far as it got. And thank you also, Andrew, for mentioning the hospitality sector, because that has lost north of 85,000 jobs in the last few months with ruinous consequences for young people. I'd like to ask a question about taxation, because excise duty on our products has gone up by 14% since August 23, and yet revenue for government has gone down by 4.8%. Responsible businesses recognise we want to raise money through taxation. It's part of our job. But we'd like to see it done in an effective and fair way. And what we see with the UK taxation system, and I think it applies for other sectors, is it's on the wrong side of the Laffer curve. Yeah. You're raising taxes to such an extent you don't raise the revenue. What would a future Conservative government do to get taxes on the right side of the Laffer curve and encourage the UK Treasury to listen to the experience of business?
So I'm very glad that you did mention the Laffer curve. We can see this in a whole bunch of areas. It is not always the case that the more tax you ask for, the more tax you get. We've seen it with VAT on private schools. We'll certainly see it with what they've done on APR and BPR. While Mel is the one who looks after tax policy, Andrew and I had a recent discussion around the Laffer curve and what we could do, because we need to send a signal to business that the best way to get the tax, as much tax as possible, is for business to generate as much in profit as it possibly can. Andrew, did you want to come in on that point?
Well, yes, Kemi. I mean, the key thing is to get the economy growing and making the pie larger. And what that is, and you mentioned a couple of those factors, is getting back to an environment where it's easier to hire, it's easier to grow. We haven't talked about energy, but the energy in this country is affordable. And then making sure that we understand the tax consequences. It's not even our goal to have as much tax as possible. We want an economy that's as big as possible, that employs as many people productively as possible, and that all of you in business do that number one thing that you wake up to do every single morning, which is happy customers, whether they're exports, whether they're domestic customers. We want to create an environment in which you can succeed to the best of your ability.
Yeah, I would add that. I'd agree with all of that entirely. In fact, I flew out to Nashville to spend a day with Arthur Laffer a month or so back, and he's absolutely right about so many taxes having reached a point now where actually the yield from those taxes is not going up with the additional rates. Now, Andrew mentioned energy, and I see we've got Andrew Bowie here, our very fine Shadow Scottish Secretary. I was up in Aberdeen recently. The level of taxation on oil, gas and gas extraction out there, which is in the mid-70% now with the energy profits levy, simply means that the whole sector is going to close down. 200,000 jobs. And I won't dwell too much on that, but the absurdity of Norway actually extracting gas from the same basin that we're shutting down our activity on, and so on, and so forth. So the answer to your question is we have to look at every single tax and really look into where it is on the Laffer curve, focus particularly on those taxes that drive wealth creation and employment and growth, and look to getting those down, and recognise that, as Kemi said earlier when she talked about people leaving the country now, which isn't just the super rich, it is young people that just happen to be mobile and talented, right? What the costs of a high tax environment are in that sense. We've lost 16,000 high net worth people during the time that this government has been in office. The estimate of the tax take that walked out the door when that 16,000 went is probably equivalent to between 1/3 and 500,000 people on average earnings, okay? So we have got to, in this increasingly mobile world where people can reallocate to lower tax jurisdictions, we've got to start getting taxes down on productive activity.
Very good. Next question is from Mike Archer. Thank you, Mike. Tell us who you are, Mike.
Yeah, good morning, Mike Archer. I'm Head of Corporate Affairs for AstraZeneca. So my question is a bit of a take on that on fiscal incentives. So as you know, business confidence is down, FDI is down, and part of the reason for that is some of the gaps in the UK's fiscal incentive regime. For example, in R&D tax credits, we don't currently include capital spend on plant and machinery within qualifying expenditure, unlike our peers in, say, France or Ireland. Now, could the Conservatives commit to reviewing all of the UK's fiscal incentives for business investment and identify those gaps and commit to delivering on those in the next manifesto?
I think that is something that I can say. And just to be clear, what we want to do in time for the next election is something really big and really bold. We have been tweaking a system for about 30, 40 years now that is no longer really fit for purpose. Every budget, every election, it's a few tweaks here, a few tweaks there, minor adjustments. We need to do something really bold, really radical, but we need to be aware of what the likely consequences will be and how we deal with the outcome. That's why we're not rushing out saying we're going to change all this and change all that. At the 2019 election, none of us could have predicted what the next few years would have looked like. No one would have predicted a global pandemic. We need to make sure that we are resilient enough to handle those sorts of black swan events and shocks while still having a radical agenda that sets, that lets business know the direction of travel. What we saw with Labour was them coming in and telling everyone how terrible it was. They had a small window to boost optimism, to boost confidence, and instead they used that window to talk the economy down because they thought it would be a good way to have a pop at us. Oh, look at the big mess the Conservatives made. All sorts of bad things are going to happen now. Everybody heard that, and then they took decisions that have meant fewer jobs and an economy that is not growing. We need to make sure that we send a strong signal that lets business see that we are open for business, that we believe in you, that we support you, that we listen to you, not just lots of pointless roundtables where you tell us all the things that are going wrong and then nothing changes. I think people are sick of that. You're speaking as someone from the pharmaceutical industry. There are a lot of things that are putting pressure on that industry, how we work within a different market, what's happening with intellectual property. I've been at World Trade Organization meetings where people are trying to eat our lunch. I don't think that enough time is really spent thinking about how we can make sure we keep one of the strongest industries that the UK has had. How do we deal with leaving the European Union and the impact on pharma? I don't think a lot of effort has been put into that. I'm not saying we go back into the EU, but what is a game-changing agenda? That's what I want all of you to see. That's what we're going to be doing. Bold, radical, game-changing, but sensible as well. Thinking about likely consequences and outcomes so that you can be reassured that competent people who know what they're doing are looking after our economy. Thank you.
And if I may add, we will have a plan. I mean, I don't think anyone in Westminster wakes up in the morning trying to do harm, but it is criminal that this government didn't have a plan for the life sciences for 15 months. Yeah. Right? This is one of, and you're all wonderful, but this is one of our most successful industries. You cannot have a growth strategy for the UK economy if that doesn't include the professional and financial services, the life sciences, hospitality. These are some of the absolute bellwethers of our economy. Anyone trying to set out a plan to grow needs to have made clear strategy decisions in advance. And yet, in many cases, we're still waiting to understand what the government is doing. We will have a plan. We will have that in advance, and we will hit the ground running rather than have drift and dither and only ever react after events have happened.
Let's hear from James Watson. James, could you stand up, please? Thank you. The mic will be brought to you.
I'm James Watson, Traditional Products. We manufacture 97% of our stair
Hold the mic a bit nearer your mouth, if you may, James.
We manufacture 97% of our stair parts in the UK. The budget appears to focus more on redistributing wealth rather than creating genuine added value. Added value is the spark that produces a fair and just economy. With the service industry now representing around 81% of GDP, a notable increase from 67% from 1997. I am particularly concerned that manufacturing, construction, farming account for less than 20% of GDP. Unless we are exporting services abroad, we are primarily redistributing wealth rather than generating true added value. How do the panel assess the implications of this shift for the overall health of the UK economy? What strategies do you propose to enhance the economy beyond mere redistribution and foster a more dynamic and resilient economic landscape?
James, thank you for that. I am worried about manufacturing. I'm worried about it not necessarily because of the ratio, but because of resilience. I think we are just forgetting how to do so many things. A lot of our institutional memory is disappearing. China is eating everybody's lunch, not just ours, Germany, Australia. You know, a lot of the countries in the Far East are concerned about its capacity. And we need to get very serious about making sure we continue to be a great manufacturing country. And the biggest thing I think we can do is focus on energy. Energy is growth. Countries that have terrible energy policies don't grow. Countries that have great energy policies do grow. And we have not had a good energy policy for many, many years now. It is too expensive for you to manufacture. We are deindustrializing. And that's something that we're paying a lot of attention to. Claire Coutinho, Shadow Energy Secretary, and Andrew Bowie have been talking about our cheap power plan, how we can make life cheaper, not just for households, but also for manufacturing. So that is the offer that we have. We've got to focus on that. We need to also look at what skills we are creating in the country. I think that not everybody is meant to be in a service economy. Out of a lot of talent in the strategy. Who is it that we need to develop? How do we do so? Looking at talent. All of these things need to be thought about in the round. And when I look at what is happening to the car manufacturing industry in particular, the endless uncertainty on the regulatory side, where decisions are made and then changed all because of politics. I think certainty is something the business needs. Uncertainty kills business just as much as bad policy. People don't invest, they don't make decisions, they can't see into the future. What we want to give you is certainty, regulatory certainty, as well as political stability. We want to make sure that people have the freedom to take the risks, knowing that everything is going to be stable. I think that's the best thing that we can do for manufacturing after looking at energy costs.
Mel, do you want to come in briefly?
Yeah, very quickly. I think that's a great question, because I think it actually leads us into what kind of economy overall that we're trying to create, okay? So we've talked a lot about tax, but there are some deep, and some would say near intractable challenges, structural issues that our economy has, that we will have to address. Now, we've talked about tax, we've talked about LAFA, we've talked about getting tax rates down, we talked about getting taxes down, particularly in areas that lean into growth and wealth creation and so on. We've talked about the size of the state, and we've made a down payment of £47 billion worth of savings. We've shown how that can translate into those lower taxes. Kemi has touched on skills. I think there are big questions about higher education and universities. We have far too many young people going through those institutions and not getting sufficient value added to justify the cost of them or the state. And we announced at our conference that we would double the amount that we would spend on apprenticeships as an approach to skills. Now, in a world in which net migration is going to be coming down, there will be hotspots in the labour market which wouldn't otherwise have been there. We've got AI, which is going to, in a fundamental way, and as yet unknown way, churn up the demand for skills. So we're going to have a nimble, lifelong apprenticeship kind of offer. And a lot of supply side things. Energy costs, certainly. We're paying 5 times what the Americans and Canadians are, probably 7 times what the Chinese are for electricity, 50% more than France and Germany. And that leads us into big questions about the environment, green issues, and the balances there, along with the future of nuclear and small modular reactors, oil and gas, the kind of issues that I know Andrew is very vexed about, and rightly so, up in the North Sea, to get those costs down, particularly as things like AI become so important. 20% of the electricity output of the Republic of Ireland solely goes into data centres. That's the level of demand. And the final thing I would say is supply side. We have got to get better at building things on budget and on time. The infrastructure, roads, rail, houses. Why is it that we end up with a £125 million back tunnel for HS2, right? Whereas the Chinese are building Beijing to Shanghai superfast rail in just 3 years. We have got to radically overhaul planning and get those infrastructure things really moving. So a big task that is going to take months and years to come up with all of the answers to those big questions, but we've got the right team to do that.
Energy, a massive subject. We're in the last 15 minutes. Very briefly, Andrew.
People often don't know all of the policies we've already announced. So, James, first of all, thank you for what you do, being a brilliant manufacturer. We will put businessmen and women in our embassies as ambassadors. There's no reason why we wouldn't do that. Many of those relationships are primarily economic, and we need a culture change in terms of promoting exports. We have promised to scrap the green tape on businesses, all of that environmental reporting you're mandated to do. If you wish to do that, that's fine, but we will not mandate businesses to do that. We will scrap that employment rights bill if it makes to the statute book. It's 329 pages. And we need, as a society, to go back and look at the honours system so that we recognise wealth creators, people who are putting back in their community, not merely the lanyard classes who are sitting there flying a desk in Whitehall.
Okay, we are now into the last 15 minutes, as I say. We're going to take questions 2 at a time. Very brisk questions, please. No speeches. Sorry to push you around. Stephen Massey takes the mic. Introduce yourself, Stephen. And can we please get a mic also to Adam Durant? Stephen? Which one's Stephen? Stephen there. And then a mic for... Then maybe you could pass the mic to Adam. Briefly, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A question about the link between the extraordinary rise in benefits and, as the leader said, people, having the option of not working. How does this feed into immigration? And in particular, the 2-child benefit cap abolition, what is that going to mean for both immigration and illegal immigration?
And to Adam, please. Thank you. Do you want to stand up, Adam? Thank you. Tell us who you are.
Hello, my name's Adam Durant. I'm an entrepreneur. I built and scaled a UK climate tech software company over the past decade, created jobs and training for scores of people, and successfully sold the business last year. Labour's budget has triggered a historic exodus of Britain's wealth creators. So as we heard from Mel, 16,000 high net worths are leaving Britain this year, overtaking China for the first time. Business asset disposal release has jumped from 10% to 18%, so that's an 80% tax rate increase. Investor relief limits were slashed 90%. angel investors face an almost 130% effective tax increase, and employee ownership trust release was cut in half. So these wealth creators are moving to
Can I have
places.
a question, please? Sorry to push you.
Sure.
A lot of people want to get in.
Does the Conservative leadership agree with the need to restore Britain's competitive position to boost entrepreneurship and growth, specifically by honouring the manifesto commitment not to increase capital gains tax?
Thank you both, gentlemen. Sorry to push.
So I'll try and be as quick as possible. Stephen asked about the rise in benefits and the link to migration. Our aim is to create an economy that does not require migration to grow. A lot of our GDP growth was actually based on having more people come into the country. And after a tipping point, many of those people were not earning that much and were bringing in loads of dependents who then needed benefits. So our policy is to make sure that we restrict benefits to UK nationals only. We've got a treaty with the EU. Those who have settled status are in a different category because we have reciprocal rights. But the bottom line is no benefits for foreign nationals. It is acting as a pull factor for a lot of people coming to this country, whether through the asylum route or elsewhere, and it is costing us billions of pounds. We do need to tackle that. So that is a simple policy that we have. We want an economy that is not reliant on immigration to grow. I think Mel can probably answer on the CGT question, but Adam, your basic question is right. We do need to be a lot more competitive. The whole point of leaving the European Union was so we could compete with the EU countries better, not so we could regulate more than them. And instead, we ended up delivering what was a more left-wing version of what the EU was offering. That is one of the reasons why we haven't been able to make as many productivity gains as possible. And as I've said, we want to do something really bold around tax, just looking at everything. What does a new world look like? I'm not going to announce new tax policy at the moment beyond what we've said, but certainly the spirit of what you're asking for, we certainly agree with.
Yeah,
very briefly.
Spirit of what you're saying, absolutely right. I would add to your tale of woe of people leaving the country, offshoring of jobs actually is the other way that we're witnessing the effects of this particular tax policy. Can't comment specifically on CGT just yet, but hear what you're saying, and it's an important point. Just, I would add to Kemi's point on immigration. The CSJ, Centre for Social Justice, has recently issued a report in which if you have 3 children and various elements of your family qualify for various different benefits, you can end up having to earn £71,000 a year in order to be getting the same net take-home pay as a family in those circumstances. This is bad messaging when it comes to illegal migration. Yeah. Because the message is you can come here, large family, and you'll be looked after.
The mic, please, to Susan Rose and also to John Pocock, please. Susan, could you stand up, please? Thank you. And then followed by John Pocock. Please stand up.
My name's Susan Rose. I'm the founder and creator of Susan Rose China in Stoke-on-Trent. We have a British manufacturing business in Stoke making British bone china. Now, we are always competing against cheap imports from China, which is hugely challenging for us. And how do we make people believe in the importance of buying British, supporting British manufacturing, and therefore encouraging young people to come in as apprentices? It is so difficult.
Thank you, Susan. John Pocock, tell us who you are, please, and briefly your question.
Hello, John Pocock. I was fortunate enough to build a FTSE 250 from scratch, so I know a little bit about growth. I've employed, recruited about 1,000 people in their 20s. I would like us to consider raising the employer's national insurance level from 21 to 24 years old, so that we get a lot more people into work coming out of university. In particular, the energy which young people in their 20s can give to a company is tremendous. I've done the mathematics. It looks doable. It will make a profit at the end of the next parliament.
2 fabulous questions.
Thank you. I was actually worried that John was going to ask that we raise employers' NI, to which my answer would have been a hard no.
He was toying with you. He was toying with you to get your attention.
He was. But, John, I completely agree with you. We need to make it easier to hire young people. You know, if they don't get that first job, then it has a massive impact on the rest of their lives. Making it easier to hire young people means making it cheaper to hire young people because they don't have that experience. And you look at the combination of what happened in the 2024 budget, raising the minimum wage, increasing employers' NI, raising the thresholds to a different amount, just made it a triple whammy of toxicity for young people. I think it is an interesting idea. We do have our own policy, which is the first jobs bonus, which is a bit similar, but it's certainly something that I think that we can look at. Susan, you asked about cheap imports. You are right. We are competing against a country that is taking manufacturing to the next level. How do we encourage people to buy British? First of all, let's create a level playing field. It is not a level playing field at the moment. You know, you're in Stoke-on-Trent. I know how many businesses have been closing because the energy costs are just too high for them to do anything on ceramics in China. So first of all, thank you for staying in business. I cannot imagine how hard it has been. But I think we also need to talk a little bit about how China makes its products. This is a country, the UK is a country, where people want to know where things come from and how it has been made. The Chinese use slave labor. We know this. A lot of what we talked about in government with the Uyghurs, we tried to put some of this in legislation. We need to make sure that the products that are coming to our country are being made at a level playing field at what we manufacture here. We believe in competition, of course, because competition helps businesses. If we stop competition, we will stop being productive. We will get poorer, but that competition has to be fair. And I think showing where there are unfair practices and people trying to cheat the system means that we will get more people thinking about where their goods come from and will buy British.
Okay, we are in the last 5 minutes. You're all busy people. You want to get on with your day, I'm sure. I'm going to take 3 more questions, very, very brisk and brief. Could we please have a mic going to Ken Costa? Ken, stand up and tell us who you are, and we'll give you a mic. And then the mic is to Mark Constable. Mark, could you stand up, please, so we can give you a mic? And then finally, Seth Finnegan as well. Let's keep this brief and brisk. So off you go, Ken.
Ken Costa, I'm an investment banker. We've seen the decline in the City of London, the stock market, the loss of confidence here, fewer people wanting to list, fewer capital raisings happening. How do we restore the City of London to its preeminent financial position in the world?
Thank you, Ken. Hold that thought. Then we come to Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Constable. I am Head of Public Affairs for Trojan Energy, an Aberdeen-based electric vehicle infrastructure manufacturer, and I'm also the elected chair of the largest electric vehicle trade association in the UK, Recharge UK. My question is, given that this government have been just largely following the previous government's policy in terms of the electric vehicle transition and making lots and lots of mixed messages that we saw in the budget last week, and that certainty is absolutely vital in our industry, what intervention would a future Conservative government make?
Thank you very much. And finally, Seth.
Good morning. I'm the UK Chief Executive of Informed Solutions. We are a UK privately owned tech scale-up specialising in data and AI. For us, the autumn budget introduced some positive measures for tech, specifically around expanded investment incentives and AI growth zones, but also clearly tax changes that could impact staff, founders, and investors. So how would a future Conservative government ensure that tech UK scale-ups are incentivised to grow whilst also balancing the books?
Thank you all, and thank you for being brief, panel.
Thank you. I will leave the question on listings and tech scale-ups to Mel and to Andrew, because I think they can give a lot more detail. I will focus on Mark's question about just certainty when it comes to energy policy. You are right. Quite a lot of what the government is doing now is slightly based on what we did in government. There has been too much uncertainty. But we were making changes, and I say this as someone who was business secretary, because industry was telling us that the policy was not working. This is one of the reasons why I've said the legislation for net zero by 2050 is unworkable. We need better incentives, and we need a plan that is not going to bankrupt our country. Right now, what we're seeing is car manufacturing leaving the UK and a mixed message being sent with the road pricing paper mile for electric vehicles when a whole bunch of people were asked to buy those vehicles in order to encourage the take-up. Now, I'm somebody who thinks that this government should not intervene in the market this much. Electric vehicles are mostly made by China. It has not been that great for our own industry, and I pay tribute to what you're doing, Mark. I don't think that it is very easy. What we need to do is to get government to stop sending confusing messages. We put some investments around gigafactories. I think that was a good thing, but we have to be realistic about what we can actually do in the UK and not turn our country just into a market that buys from China when it cannot manufacture on its own. And that's why we oppose quite a lot of what the government is doing. It's not helping UK manufacturing. It's too expensive for UK consumers. It's not really working for our businesses, and it's making China wealthier at a time when they're becoming more and more of an economic threat.
Your final thoughts, Mel, before we
very
finish with
quickly.
Andrew?
So on Ken's point about the city, I think, firstly, the listings regime and how onerous that is. Secondly, on tax and stamp duty in particular on share transactions. There's a third point, I think, about the depth of the capital pools that there are in our country, particularly long-term patient capital. And I think there the pension sector is a very important component part. And we've seen some of the reforms that when we were in government, kicked off around the Mansion House Compact, and where that money goes as between foreign investment and domestic investment. We're not up for any form of mandation, because these pensions quite rightly have a fiduciary duty to get the best return for their investors. But nonetheless, I do think we need to ask questions around the way the tax reliefs work, given that that is a contribution to the UK taxpayer, and that in relation to where those investments are going. And the final thing I would say is I'll leave Andrew to speak a little bit more about scale-ups. But of course, we've been great with our universities, etc., spinning these businesses out. It is that next stage that we get to. There's an important prize if we can get this right, in that if you look at the different valuations on stock markets around the world, a lot of it is driven in the US by having these high-tech, big growth, high PE businesses there, and we need to have more of them for the overall health of our financial ecosystem.
And finally, Andrew Griffith.
Wow, right. Okay, look, we need, for all, the uniting theme around a lot of this is we also need a vision. We need to give people confidence. We need to be proud of this country. We can, once again, be one of the best countries in the world. At the moment, we're falling down the prosperity league tables. We're approaching 30. I don't want that for my children. None of us here want that for our children or our grandchildren. We ought to be going out and giving business, because it is business that creates jobs, business that's going to create the prosperity, business that will provide the tax receipts for all of the things that we want. We ought to, as an economy, acknowledge that the pace car, the competitive set, is not the G7. If you X out the United States, the G7 is the other group of slowly growing economies. We want to compete with the best and brightest in the world, the G20, some of the fast-growing economies, which is where we are losing our young people to and our wealth creators. We need to fall back in love with risk. Post-2008, the entire city establishment sought their role to extinguish risk. And if you extinguish risk, you will not have any growth. And then finally, we as a country, and this is where my party meandered with its core principles, to put it mildly, we need to once again get back to being on the side of wealth creators, unequivocally, in everything we do, in our policies around red tape, around regulation, in what Mel is doing on tax. We need to understand that you build an economy on the back of wealth, not welfare.
Exactly.
Andrew Griffith, thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, that does bring proceedings to a close. I'm Liam Halligan. You can read my work in the Sunday Telegraph. You can listen to the Planet Normal podcast, where I sometimes get to talk alongside Alison Pearson, the wonderful Alison Pearson, and you can read me on my When the Facts Change Substack. And I've just started a new economics show, weekly show on my Substack. So there you go. Thank you to the ICAEW for hosting us so beautifully. Thank you to the Conservative Party for asking me to host this event. Thanks to all of you for your excellent questions. Sorry if I was forcing you to be too brisk. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, for our panel: Andrew Griffith, Shadow Business Secretary; Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor; and, of course, Kemi Badenoch, Leader of the Opposition. Thank you very much.
Well done. Very good.
Well done.
of a stereotyping of black people in expensive cars. Can I ask you, was that sort of stereotyping also prevalent within police ranks?
Absolutely.
Together with other stereotypes and tropes of black people?
Definitely, but emphasising, obviously, we're talking about 1986 to 1990 when I was a uniform officer.
And Asian people?
Not for us so much there in Bromley at the time.
Was there a view that a black person was more likely to be involved in crime?
Definitely.
Emphasis
a young black person, particular of the age group. You had, elderly black couple going to Bromley shopping. No, but if you did have some youth come down, then yes, that would be regarded as they're almost in Bromley for up to no good type thing.
Was there a distinction between males and females?
More to male.
And were there any stereotypes about the levels of intelligence within the black population?
Unfortunately, yes.
And what was the perception?
Very negative. Very negative. Maybe it was very negative, but to a certain degree, maybe it was correct. Their career trajectory was not